The Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, is on his way back to the United States. Thank you for joining us on WUSA 9 and streaming on WUSA 9 Plus. I'm Simone D'Alba.
And I'm Larry Miller. It's been more than 2 months since the Trump administration first admitted it mistakenly deported Abrego Garcia from Maryland. Right now, we're waiting for the Justice Department to start a press conference about his return back to the U.S.
Our Jordan Fisher is in the WUSA 9 newsroom. Jordan, you've gotten those court documents with the charges Abrego Garcia is facing. What have you learned?
Yeah, that's right. We just got the 2-count indictment that was unsealed today in the Middle District of Tennessee, but actually we've learned filed last month under seal. Now the counts here are conspiracy and transportation of undocumented aliens. We're still going through. Right, but what we're hearing, what we're learning from here is that this is based on a traffic stop in November 2022. The allegations here, again, as I'm just going through them, are that Abrego Garcia was the driver of a van. There were 9 other additional passengers in that van. None of those passengers had any form of documentation on them. What investigators are saying is that Abrego Garcia and the passengers said that they were coming from St. Louis. They were on their way to Maryland, but this is a new detail that license plate readers show that that van, according to investigators, was nowhere near St. Louis anywhere in the previous week. It was actually in the Houston, Texas area. Now, a couple things about the fact that it's an indictment. That means, although we haven't seen it, there is additional evidence that has been shown to a federal grand jury in the Middle District of Tennessee. They will have, that's a higher standard to meet than what they sometimes file in these cases. It's called a criminal complaint. We are not going to see all of that evidence, at the very least, until Abrego Garcia goes into a courtroom. They will likely ask for detention. They will have to supply additional information to convince a judge to detain him. Of course, there's this question of his mistaken deportation and how that will come into those hearings.
Jordan, thank you for that. I want you to stand by because, clearly this is all developing within the last hour or so. Simone, one of the big things that, at least where we're getting from court documents here, and Jordan, you've been able to articulate for us in your report there, was that at least the allegation from the government is that Kilmar Abrego, in addition to others, conspired to bring undocumented aliens to the United States.
Let's go to this press conference with the Department of Justice and hear what they have to say.
On May 21st, a grand jury in the Middle District of Tennessee returned a sealed indictment charging Abrego Garcia with alien smuggling and conspiracy to commit alien smuggling in violation of Title 8 U.S.C. 1324. We want to thank President Bukele for agreeing to return Abrego Garcia to the United States. Our government presented El Salvador with an arrest warrant, and they agreed to return him to our country. We're grateful to President Bukele for agreeing to return him to our country to face these very serious charges. This is what American justice looks like. Upon completion of his sentence, we anticipate he will be returned to his home country of El Salvador. The grand jury found that over the past 9 years, Abrego Garcia has played a significant role in an alien smuggling ring. They found this was his full-time job, not a contractor. He was a smuggler of humans and children and women. He made over 100 trips, the grand jury found, smuggling people throughout our country. MS-13 members, violent gang terrorist organization members throughout our country. Thousands of illegal aliens were smuggled. This is especially disturbing because Abrego Garcia is also alleged with transporting minor children. The defendant traded the innocence of minor children for profit. There are even more disturbing facts that the grand jury uncovered. It is alleged this defendant is part of the same smuggling ring responsible for the death of more than 50 migrants in 2021 after the tractor trailer overturned in Mexico. This is part of that same ring. The defendant abused undocumented alien females, according to co-conspirators, who were under his control while transporting them throughout our country. This defendant trafficked firearms and narcotics throughout our country on multiple occasions. They were using vehicles, SUVs, with added seats in the back, floors that had been ripped out, guns, narcotics, children, women, MS-13 members. That is what the grand jury found. A co-conspirator alleged that the defendant solicited nude photographs and videos of a minor. A co-conspirator also alleges the defendant played a role in the murder of a rival gang member's mother. These facts demonstrate Abrego Garcia is a danger to our community. We want to thank the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, our state and local partners, our acting U.S. Attorney Robert McGuire, and prosecutors from the Joint Task Force Vulcan. Questions?
Attorney General, the traffic stop that we've seen video of from Tennessee, where Abrego Garcia was first identified by the local authorities. At the time, the Homeland Security Department declined to take custody of him. What has happened in between that time and in between the time that the government has been arguing that he was not returnable from El Salvador? What has happened since in this investigation that brought you here?
Yes, the question was in 2021, there was the traffic stop. And what has changed since then? What has changed is Donald Trump is now president of the United States and our borders are again secure. And thanks to the bright light that has been shined on Abrego Garcia, this investigation continued with actually amazing police work. And we were able to track this case and stop this international smuggling ring from continuing.
But these were recently found facts, right?
Yes,
okay.
Recently found facts.
To that point, can you just explain when this investigation was opened? The investigation in Tennessee, can you say when that investigation was opened?
Well, the grand jury indicted on May 21st. This investigation has been ongoing.
This case has been hotly debated here in Washington. In your mind, does this resolve that issue in terms of his deportation? And should this be seen in any way as complying with the judge's order to return him to the U.S. and the Supreme Court ruling that the U.S. government should facilitate his return?
There's a big difference between what the state of play was before the indictment and after the indictment. And so the reason why he is back and was returned was because there's an arrest warrant, which was presented to the government in El Salvador. So there's a big difference there. As far as whether it makes the ongoing litigation in Maryland moot, I would think so, but we don't know that. This, he just landed today.
Jake, CBS.
I just want to confirm what you said earlier, that you're intending to prosecute him and keep him in an American prison if he's found guilty, and then would remove him after his sentence is over.
Correct. Yes, he will be prosecuted in our country, sentenced in our country if convicted, and then returned after completion of his sentence.
Last one, Sadie, Wall Street Journal.
Okay. I have two. One's on topic, one's off topic. Maybe I misunderstood you, but you were mentioning, that he had some involvement in a murder, or was connected to groups that had, involved with this other smuggling ring. But to be clear, the only charges he's facing right now are the, human smuggling charges. Just that's the one offense. But the other things that you have talked about are not actually in the indictment?
No, co-conspirators allege that. And we were clear to say that he is charged with, it's not only very serious charges of alien smuggling. And again, there were children involved in that. Human trafficking, not only in our country, but in our world, is very, very real. It's very dangerous. And as you saw recently in Virginia, the arrest we made of the MS-13 member, unrelated to this, we learned at that press conference That's where they bring young children into our country and they start grooming them at middle school age to become MS-13 full-fledged members, commit violent crimes throughout our country. It is highly organized. It is very dangerous. And they are living throughout our country, but no more, because they are being arrested, they are being prosecuted, and being convicted and deported when appropriate. That's all for today. Thank you.
All right, that was U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi giving us an update now on the charges that Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man mistakenly deported by ICE to El Salvador, will face upon his return back to the United States. We understand that he is on a plane making his way back home and will land at Dulles at some point tonight.
Huge news coming down. We heard Attorney General Pam Bondi saying the two indictments are in regard to alien smuggling and conspiracy to commit alien smuggling. Notably, she said that he was a significant part of an alien smuggling ring. She said this was his full-time job, that he made over 100 trips smuggling people throughout the country, including MS-13 gang members.
Yeah, and that MS-13 allegation has been floating around a lot. It was even said in court when this was first being litigated. But we've yet to get any sort of proof, at least from the government, to substantiate the claims that Mr. Abrego Garcia is a member of MS-13. His wife and his attorneys have denied those claims. And it really was that Supreme Court order that we had signed by the Chief Justice, where the Trump administration was ordered and to facilitate his return back to the U.S.
Also, what's fascinating, to kind of build on your point, this is a grand jury indictment out of Tennessee. He was arrested, locally in Maryland. And so this is something that we're continuing to watch in terms of these trafficking allegations, because one of the main questions that's unclear is if they knew he was part of this alleged trafficking ring at the time of the arrest. This indictment came down at the end of May, is what they were saying. And so these are all details that are at this point not clear. Larry and I both have the indictment in front of us. Jordan Fisher, our investigative reporter, is combing through this as well, and I know we're going to check in with him. But there's a lot to really unpack in terms of the larger implications of this, the conversation around immigration and due process. We've seen Senator Chris Van Hollen make the trip down to El Salvador, to that very dangerous prison, one of the most dangerous prisons in the world, where Kilmar Abrego Garcia was being held.
And at that prison, the U.S. actually pays to have prisoners held and confined there. That is actually not a facility that is owned by the United States government. You may remember when the president of El Salvador met with President Trump at the White House some time ago, the conversations were happening there, at least from the press corps to the president. Well, if the president of El Salvador is here now, why can he not return Abrego Garcia back to the United States? And even then, the president of El Salvador was clear that they didn't want to bring, as he termed it, someone that had this sort of criminal past, as he alleged, back to the U.S.
Well, and this was all really fascinating, too, because Attorney General Pam Bondi was saying how this is all going to play out. He's coming back here for due process. He's going to be tried in our courts here in the United States. He will serve his sentence here and then ultimately be deported back to El Salvador, is what she was saying. It was notable, too, she said, everything here in this indictment, she called these, quote, recently found facts. And I think that is something that we're going to see dissected and looked into in a multitude of different ways.
I think we also have to be clear, too, the government is making an allegation. That allegation has to be substantiated in a court. The court, jury, judge has to agree with the allegations, and he has to be convicted. He hasn't been convicted of a crime. There are merely two allegations about him. One, alien smuggling and conspiracy to commit smuggling. A lot of things were said by the Attorney General. Only two charges have been lodged against Mr. Abrego Garcia.
And the conversation, Larry, to your point about due process prior to deportation, which he did not have. We're looking now in retrospect behind, right? He was been deported and now he'll get his due process. And so that is the larger conversation. That is the significance of this case around the country, that you have your day in court, no matter what, before you face deportation.
And every judge that was associated with this case and making some sort of determination about getting Mr. Abrego Garcia back to the United States said that. That's what we heard from the Chief Justice as well as from the District Court judge, was that he is entitled to due process and should have it.
Certainly. So again, big news. We know that Kilmar Abrego Garcia on a plane making his way back to the United States. Let's go ahead and bring in Jordan Fisher, our investigative reporter. Jordan, you've been combing through some of these documents. You know, what stands out to you? Because when Pam Bondi said she called these, quote, recently found facts, did any of that ring a bell to you? What are you noticing?
Right. We heard a lot of things in that press conference that are not necessarily found in this 9-page indictment here. Now, that's not wildly shocking. That's how indictments work. This is what we call a speaking indictment, so it has some additional facts about the charges. We'll hear a lot more later, as I said. But a lot of this case appears to come from two so far unnamed co-conspirators who the government is going to allege were part of this vaster, grand human smuggling conspiracy that the Attorney General has outlined here. And again, a lot of those details aren't found here. She mentioned his possible involvement in a murder. There's nothing about that here in this indictment. She mentioned, smuggling children. That's not here in this indictment. What is in this indictment is a lot of details about a traffic stop in 2022 in Tennessee, and that's why this case is being filed in the Middle District of Tennessee. A lot of this other stuff we're going to have to hear. And now when you hear I talk to defense attorneys all day, and I can tell you as soon as whoever is going to wind up representing Kilmar Abrego Garcia in court heard recently discovered facts, their sort of defense attorney spider sense went off, because they're going to say that, they're going to really be pressing these witnesses when they eventually get called to court on how it was that they were willing and when they were willing and why they were willing to offer these facts that apparently were previously never told to the government before. And that's something you see in trials all the time when you have cooperating witnesses. It's going to be a huge, huge issue in this case.
Did it strike you as interesting that the dates on this indictment are from 2016 to 2025, 9 years? He's been arrested, he was deported, and none of this has come up in conversation up until this moment.
Right, and of course the statute of limitations on most federal crimes is 5 years. Now that doesn't mean, if they can substantiate it, evidence of, potential crimes from before 2020 wouldn't necessarily be admissible. But that's, I think, again, why you have an indictment here that focuses almost exclusively, the actual charge here, almost exclusively on this 2022 traffic stop. It's going to be so interesting to see what evidence does come out and how they're able to say that they were fined. The timing of the indictment, of course, filed under seal last month amid extremely contentious at times negotiations between Abrego Garcia and the Justice Department, and in some ways the judicial system and the Justice Department. Really a case that's going to be watched very closely.
Jordan, before we let you go, last question here. What do you make of Pam Bondi's statement that that the government needed an arrest warrant in order to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia back to the United States? He was at a facility in El Salvador where the United States pays to have prisoners held there and confined there. The fact that it took an arrest warrant in order for the president of El Salvador to help facilitate his return back to the U.S. Seemed a bit surprising to some.
Right. Well, I think we really saw and heard Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, showed a lot of resistance to the idea that Kilmar Abrego Garcia was brought back because of court order. They want to say that it's because of this criminal case, but of course this criminal case didn't materialize until late last month. That order to return him far predates that. So again, more fodder for his eventual defense attorneys.
Look, a remarkable moment unfolding here as we bring it to you live on TV. We're awaiting Kilmar Abrego Garcia back on U.S. soil, and this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Of course, we'll be keeping you posted right here. Jordan Fisher, thank you, sir. We appreciate you.